Around the year 921 AD, the Volga Bulgars, who were subject to the Khazars, sent a letter to the Caliph of the Abbasids, al-Muqtadir, and requested that he send religious instructors to acquaint the Bulgars with the laws of Islam. The Bulgar king also requested that the Muslims help them build a fortress so they could protect themselves from the Khazars. The Volga Bulgars were a Turkic people that flourished in the region of the Volga from the 5th to 7th centuries AD. During the emergence of the Khazars, the Bulgars offered the most resistance, but eventually they were defeated. As a result, the Bulgars were split into two different groups, a western branch that lived adjacent to the Danube River, and they were called the Danube Bulgars. Later, this group would go on to assimilate into Slavic and Byzantine populations, and they formed the bulk of people who we call the Bulgarians today in Bulgaria. Their eastern branch was called the Volga Bulgars, and they lived adjacent to the Volga River. They were subjects of the Khazars for centuries, and according to Arab geographer Histakri, their languages were very familiar. Evidently, the Volga Bulgars were fed up with the Khazars and asked the Abbasid Caliphate for assistance against their overlords. The Caliph granted all the requests of the Bulgars and commissioned an expedition that was led by Arab traveler Ibn Fadlan. Ibn Fadlan was a 10th century Arab traveler from the Abbasid Caliphate who was famous for his account of the expedition to the king of the Volga Bulgars, which we are about to discuss now. During this expedition, Ibn Fadlan relates what he saw in the land of the Turks, the Khazars, the Rus, the Bulgars, the Bashkirs, and many others. He took note of their religion, their history, and their conduct. The books I will be using to present this history are The History of the Jewish Khazars by D.M. Dunlop and The 13th Tribe by Arthur Koestler. Ibn Fadlan's travelogue reads, "We started out on Thursday the 11th, Safar, of the year 309, from the City of Peace. This date is converted to June 21st, 921 AD, and the City of Peace is Baghdad. Baghdad was the capital of the Abbasid Empire. During this period, the Rus were expanding and signing treaties with the Byzantines. They also had subjugated some of the Khazars' vassals, like the Slavs, which was an indirect invasion of the Khazar Khaganate. In 921 AD, during the period of this expedition, the Abbasid Caliphate had reached its zenith. They went from this in 850 AD to this by 921 AD. The loss of many vassal states and an accumulation of many rebel governments indicated a declining state for the Abbasid Empire. So we can only imagine that when the Abbasids received this request from the Bulgars, it must have given them a sense of hope. Maybe this Abbasid-Bulgar alliance against the Khazars would prove helpful for the declining state of the Caliphate. I'm just trying to provide a little context. From Baghdad, the expedition traveled west. The beginning of the expedition seemed to be uneventful because not much is recorded until they reach Khwarezm. Here, they met the governor in charge of the province. This area maintained good trade relations with the Khazars, and the governor tried to stop them from proceeding by convincing them that up ahead there were 1,000 tribes of disbelievers who were most likely going to kill them. By disbelievers, the governor meant disbelievers in Islam. Eventually, whatever took place, the expedition was allowed to proceed. Concerning the inhabitants of this region, Ibn Fadlan states this: "They are, in respect of their language and constitution, the most repulsive of man. Their language is like the chatter of starlings. At a day's journey, there is a village called Ardqua, whose inhabitants are called Cardals. Their language sounds entirely like frogs. From here, they came to Gurganj, which is today called Urganj, a city in Uzbekistan, a country in Central Asia. They hibernated here for 3 months due to the intensely cold weather." Ibn Fadlan writes this: "The river was frozen for 3 months. We looked at the landscape and thought that the gates of cold hell had been opened for us. Verily, I saw that the marketplace and the streets were totally empty because of the cold. Once, when I came out of the bath and got home, I saw that my beard had frozen into a lump of ice, and I had to thaw it out in front of the fire. I stayed for some days in a house which was inside of another house, and in which there stood a Turkish felt tent, and I lay inside the tent wrapped in clothes and furs, but nevertheless, my cheeks often froze to the cushion." Ibn Fadlan then goes to relate how the ice began to thaw in February 922 AD. They arranged to join a caravan of 5,000 men and 3,000 pack animals, so they could obtain the supplies they needed to cross the northern steppes. They were warned by the natives that the weather was even colder further north. Ibn Fadlan then relates how he prepared for the weather. Each of us put on a kurta, over that a woolen kaftan, over that a buslan, over that a burqa and a fur cap, under which only the eyes can be seen, a simple pair of underpants and another pants, and over that trousers, house shoes of kamut, and over these also another pair of boots. And when one of us mounted a camel, he was unable to move because of his clothes. Well, I think we have a pretty good idea of how people 1,000 years ago survived in the winter. They just clothed themselves with layers until they could barely move. But anyways, after Gurginch, they traveled across the desert and stayed the night in Zamgun. They called this area the Gateway of the Oghuz Turks. We briefly spoke about these Turks and their attacks in the last episode that forced the Pechenegs to migrate west into Khazar territory, which in return forced the Magyars to migrate west into present-day Hungary. Ibn Fadlan noted how during the expedition he rode next to a Turk that was complaining because of the cold weather. The Turk said to Ibn Fadlan, "What does this ruler want from us? He is killing us with this cold. If we knew what he wanted, then we would just give it to him." Ibn Fadlan responded to the Turk and said, "All he wants is that you people should say, 'There is no God.'" The Turk then laughed and said, "If we knew that, then we would just say it." Ibn Fadlan then writes, "The next morning one of the Turks met us, that is, the Oghuz Turks. He was ugly in build, dirty in appearance, contemptible in manners, base in nature, and we were moving through the heavy rain. Then he said, 'Halt!' Then the whole caravan of 3,000 animals and 5,000 men halted. Then he said, 'Not a single one of you is allowed to go on.' We halted then, obeying his orders. Then we said to him, 'We are friends of the Khazars,' that is the governor of the Oghuz Turks. The Turk then began to laugh at the expedition and said, 'Who is the Khazars?' Then the Oghuz Turk requested bread from the expedition, and after he was given what he requested, he said to Ibn Fadlan, 'Continue your journey. I have taken pity on you.' In Ibn Fadlan's travel log, he continues to describe the Oghuz Turks in this manner. They are wandering tribes and have houses of felt. They stay in one place and then move on. Although they live a hard life, they behave like donkeys that have lost their way. They have no religion which would link them to God, nor are they guided by reason. They do not worship anything. They take counsel among themselves, but when they have made a decision, even the lowliest man among them can come disrupt that decision. Their women wear no veils in the presence of their man or strangers, nor do their women cover any parts of their bodies in the presence of people. The Oghuz do not wash themselves after defecating or urinating, nor do they bathe after seminal pollution or any other occasion. They refuse to have anything to do with water, particularly in winter. When the Oghuz commander-in-chief took off his luxurious coat of brocade to wear a new coat the mission had brought him, they saw that his underclothes were fraying apart from dirt, for it is their custom to never take off the garment they wear close to their bodies until it disintegrates. Some historians say that when Ibn Fadlan wrote this, he was being biased, but, anyways, it kind of gives us an idea of the lifestyle of the Turks. The Arabs, on the other hand, most of whom claimed descent from Abraham, were accustomed to luxurious baths and a sanitary lifestyle back in Baghdad. Their association with Judaism made them well aware of how to live a clean lifestyle and conduct themselves in an appropriate manner. Ibn Fadlan then speaks about the Bashkirs and the Volga Bulgars in the same way that he spoke about the Oghuz Turks. In May of 922 AD, which is almost a year from the start of the expedition, they finally reached their destination, that is, the land of the Volga Bulgars. They could have reached their destination faster, but they would have had to go through the land of the Khazars and the Caucasus Mountains. But since the expedition was opposing the Khazars, since the Arabs sought to convert the Bulgars to Islam, they took the long way around, circumnavigating what was called the Khazar Sea, that is, the Caspian Sea. After they met the Volga Bulgars, they had festivities, and after the ceremony, the king of the Bulgars jumped straight to business. He summoned Ibn Fadlan and aggressively reminded him that the main purpose of the mission was for the Muslims to give the Volga Bulgars some money and help them build a fortress so they could protect themselves from the Jews who subjugated them. Ibn Fadlan related to the Bulgar leader that the money had not been sent with the expedition, but was soon to come. The Turk responded to Ibn Fadlan and said, "What would you think of a group of men who are given a sum of money destined for a people that is weak, besieged, and oppressed? Yet these men defraud the money." Ibn Fadlan then reassured the Bulgars that the money would soon be delivered to them. What we can take from this account so far is that the Bulgar leader said that he was subjugated and oppressed and besieged by Jews. This account confirms how strong the Khazar state was in the year of 922 AD, and how influential their conversion to Judaism was, since the Bulgars said they were subjugated by Jews. The Volga Bulgars were willing to do anything to release themselves from the yoke of the Khazars. The anxiety exhibited by the Bulgar king was explained by Ibn Fadlan when he wrote this. The Bulgar king's son was held as hostage by the king of the Khazars. It was reported to the king of the Khazars that the Bulgar king had a beautiful daughter. He sent a messenger to ascertain for her. The Bulgar king used false excuses to refuse his consent. The Khazar then sent another messenger and took her by force. Although he was a Jew and she a Muslim, but she died shortly after, and the Khazar king sent another messenger and asked for the Bulgar king's other daughter. But as soon as the Bulgar king learned of the second messenger, he swiftly married his daughter to the prince of Askil, who were another Turkic tribe that were subject to the Bulgars. This pressure from the Khazars was the primary reason the Bulgar king entered into an alliance with the caliph and asked him to have a fortress made. He simply feared the medieval Jewish empire, who ruled over them with a hard hand. Unfortunately, during the expedition, Ibn Fadlan never met the Khazars, but he does convey to us what he learned about them from the Bulgars. It is the custom of the king of the Khazars to have 25 wives. Each wife is the daughter of a king who owes him allegiance. He takes them by consent or by force. He has 60 girls for concubines, each of them of exquisite beauty. Now, whether the Volga Bulgars ever received their money or not is not known, but during this expedition, the Volga Bulgars did convert to Islam. The region these Bulgars inhabited is in modern-day Tatarstan, Russia, and it is still dominated by Islam. Ibn Fadlan ends his report with these words: "The Khazars and their king are all Jews. The Bulgars and their neighbors are subject to him. They treat him with worshipful obedience." I hope to see you in the next episode, where we will analyze the fall of the Khazar Empire. I had to split these videos into 2 separate videos, since the next video has so much information in it. Once again, thank you for watching.